we have Professor Sundar Sarukkai here. We are very happy to have you here, sir. Professor Sundar Sarukkai has had a wonderful journey through philosophy and science and fiction, a lot of different men of different disciplines and things. Could you please tell us, like, how did you start from the science and ended up in philosophy and fiction?
Thank you, Mushkur. It's lovely to be here. Always enjoy coming to Calicut and engaging with many of your groups here. Thank you for this particular opportunity to share some thoughts. We've been talking about some of these things for the last 2 days and yesterday with you. And there's so much of common questions and themes we're all interested in. So I'm glad that we have some limited time to start thinking about it. Well, as for me, whether it's disciplines are just one framework to make sense of the world. So when I was interested in physics, I thought physics was a way to understand the world in some sense, and it's something which I'm very close to, physics or maths, disciplines I really enjoy. But then I thought there are certain questions which were not within the domain of the discipline per se, or the kind of questions one can ask about what I was doing in physics. So, I mean, I was interested in literature as I was young, and therefore philosophy and literature seemed to be very, something which allowed me a way of thinking about the world, understanding it in some sense through a different framework. So philosophy is all, for me, I would see it as a very natural progression of my thinking. But like in everything else, you need institutional structures to support you.
Yes.
And when it happened, when I was doing my PhD in physics, I could also find possibility to study philosophy. That made it possible for me to shift.
Okay. So you mean the moving towards the philosophy and then towards the literature gives you more freedom, or it gives you like a way out from the limitations of the place you have been, like for example the science, then philosophy opens more possibilities, then the fiction gives you a bit more in the sense you can be more rebellious when it comes to the fiction.
Very interesting point. That's an interesting way to put it. I don't. Okay, so the first thing is, when I moved from physics to philosophy, for example, I was actually doing something else. I was not more free in the problems I was trying to solve, because every discipline has its own objects of interest. And while there's a lot of very interesting things in physics, those kind of questions, doing research at that level, did not capture my interest as much, because I was more interested about people. I was more interested about culture and societies. And so those questions were very much, I was trying to make sense of the world we are living in. So the social world and the personal psychological world intruded into my doing of science. And doing science is really difficult, and you need a lot of perseverance. You need to be focused. Many times I know, very competent scientists have to cut out, they are also very interested in other things too, but they may have to cut out on many of those interests in order to focus on it. And it just came at a point of time for me that when I found that I'm willing to do that for philosophy. And I thought it was not, I didn't want to do that much energy for doing some models or doing some solving a physics problem. But learning philosophy and writing and doing all the hard work in philosophy for me was worth it, because that is the domain which interested me. So by that I don't mean that I could do physics better, because I didn't do physics at all. I stepped away from it. But because philosophy at one level is about trying to understand foundations of something. So it made me appreciate the sciences a lot more. Because I began to understand why you would do certain kinds of things. How did science develop? So history and philosophy of science was so fascinating. And then later on, when I read about sociology of science, it really made me see the complexity and the richness of any of these human activities, including science. So it's a different kind of a rigor in philosophy than in science. But literature, I've always wanted to write. I think my writing in philosophy is also triggered with the same. The way I write fiction and philosophy are very similar. You know, it just kind of immersion to something and writing about it. Yes, I think you're right that literature gave me a little more freedom to be able to talk about things. For example, following a prayer which we'll talk about, allowed me to write about religion, which I couldn't have done in a philosophical or even in an academic manner. And also, I think fiction brought me back to what I think is one of the most important functions of language, which is language as a real force which can make you, it's not just to communicate and transmit some content, knowledge or truth or whatever, but it's something which can make you feel very deeply. And for me, fiction is really an exploration of language, what I can do with language, not just to tell a story, but how I can, you know, how you transmit and make, you know, make language really speak yourself, push at your limits of being. So in that sense, there were different phases, I think. But you know, this writing is not like, it's not like I did writing after doing philosophy. It has always been part of it. I've been writing for a long time. I've been writing plays and some part of the fiction I've been writing earlier. So it is just that at this time I could find a publisher to publish it. So that's far more important than just writing.
True.
Yeah.
So I feel like philosophy or science invest more towards the disambiguation, like quantifying things and making it more precise and more clear, removing all the disambiguation, ambiguities and things. But when you comes towards the philosophy or more towards the fiction, you have more spaces for ambiguities. So much so that the end of you end your fiction, your novel, without with an open ending, in the sense you allow the reader to interpret, like what happened later, like what happened to the children. Did they come back? Did they speak later? What happened to them? Like a complete world of ambiguities. So it gives you more freedom, I guess. But then I was wondering, like, how do you navigate these two? You said you started writing fictions and things while you were doing the science itself. But then how did you navigate in between these two extremes, or not extremes to in per se, but in these two, like the extreme disambiguation and quantifying of the philosophy or of the science, and then the other side of the fiction?
You know, again, a very fascinating question. I think you've zeroed in on a very important question about science itself. Yes, it's true that science focuses on particular kinds of descriptions which uses quantification. So it is a way of having a little more quote unquote objective forms of discourse once I have a quantified term to talk about phenomena. Okay. But that does not mean that there is no ambiguity. In fact, my first book, which I wrote in philosophy called Translating the World, Science and Language, is actually a book about showing how meaning is produced in science and mathematics and science. And where I argue that metaphorical imagination, which people often say is only about literature, is very much a part of scientific and mathematical writing. The point is actually a very interesting question about how science uses language itself. The point, what I'm trying to say is, the so-called problem of ambiguity may not be within disciplines like philosophy, science or literature. It is more about language. The belief that, let's say, languages like English or Malayalam, etc., by themselves, the spoken languages, are ambiguous means that words can have different meanings. In the loosest sense, that's what we actually mean. And but that goes back to a fundamental question in philosophy of language. What really, does a word has a fixed meaning, or does a word acquire meaning in the context of a sentence or in the context of a larger text, and so on? That's a very fundamental question, right?
Or is the language lie altogether?
That
as you would say.
Yeah, that is, okay, that's a more radical end which I bring in my novel. But this is basically the question of so-called ambiguity. Now, when scientists have been invoking this question of mathematics as the language of science, they were trying to suggest that quantification or mathematization in general reduces ambiguity and it has very specific meaning. But that's really not true. In fact, the power of scientific theorizing comes from the fact that a symbol can actually acquire different meanings
Yes.
at different stages, and therefore it makes it very powerful.
Yes.
So, one hand we could look at these things in different ways. One is to have one fixed meaning, other is to have many different meanings, or third, which is a strategy of symbolization, mathematics, is to say it has no meaning at all.
Okay.
It's just an empty thing. I'm doing what I want with it,
Okay.
and I will add meaning when I want.
Yes.
So that is the function of scientific theorizing.
Okay.
So it is actually, that's why it's so creative and powerful. So for me, yeah, I didn't find it as a challenge even when I was doing science to write, because for me the question was, it was very clear at some level that science is about the domains are very different. That science is about certain kinds of things. It could be about how do electrons behave, or what happens in an atomic structure, or how do they describe gravity, and so on. Okay, that is the object of interest.
Okay.
And I can, it doesn't matter to me whether I use a different model. I can play around with it. I have a lot of freedom to say, what if gravity was something else? Let me build a model and see what will happen. There's no cost to it.
Okay.
But let us say I'm talking about you or a community or
Yes.
people. I don't have that freedom. In fact, meaning is far more constrained
Oh, okay.
in the social science.
Oh, really?
I can't just say, I can say anything I want about an object, a stone.
Okay.
I can say maybe it has some quality which is like this, or Newton said gravity is 1 over r squared. I'll say, actually you can write legitimate scientific thing by saying, let us assume that the real gravity is not exactly 1 over r squared, maybe 1 over r cubed, or r 2.0003. And let me see what happens to the consequence. So I build a model.
Yeah, true.
But when I'm talking about you or individuals, or writing a novel about individual characters, or about writing in social science about communities and others, then we are actually far more constrained.
Oh, really? That's a very interesting argument to make.
Because we are constrained, right?
Oh, and, but a general feeling is that when it comes to the science, you're more constrained, and more comes towards the disambiguation and clarifying things and things. But you would say that's a domain of more imagination?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Creativity.
Creativity.
See, ask this simple question, which I often ask my science students, right? Which is, science today is actually, although the meaning of the word science is knowledge, that's the root of the word, to know, knowing, knowledge. Science today is really about research, producing new knowledge.
Okay.
It's not just about communicating knowledge. If you're a scientist, you have to publish. You have to, and publication is nothing but producing new knowledge. If you look at the number,
it has become an entity in itself.
It is a factory of knowledge production. It's not just a factory; it's a huge mega factory. If you look at the number of papers published every year, it runs into millions.
Okay.
It runs. That means each paper has produced new bit of knowledge. Now we have millions of these papers which are published. Are we really producing that much knowledge?
Exactly.
Or is it about producing, because your imagination is really not that cut? You can actually imagine anything about the universe. The only constraint is the language of expressing it, the rules of following certain kinds of calculational logic of it, correct calculation, etc. But in principle, the more more radical you are, the possibility of a more radical science is very much present.
Okay.
For Einstein to think about, re-look at the experimental results of his time and to reimagine the meaning of space and time is a very radical step. It's a very philosophical, literary imagination which runs that.
True.
Right? But then after doing it, you control it within the discipline of the language and the discourse. That's science. I think, therefore, that much freedom is not as much available to social science, theorizing and so on. You are a lot more constrained for various other reasons. Including the simple fact that I can do any experiment on an object. I take a stone, I want to break it, I will set light fire to it, I will melt it and so on. But obviously you can't do it too.
In social sciences.
In various communities and humans and so on, or even animals today. So And that just gives one illustration of actually
True,
the constraints present. So
Uh-huh.
within the constraint, you have to produce meaningful knowledge. But the problem in the science also uses mathematics as its language, which allows a great scope of freedom. Because mathematics, remember, is more like poetry. In fact, for a very long time, even in India, till 20, 30 years back, it was taught as a BA, not as a BSc course.
Oh, really?
It was an arts course.
Okay.
Traditionally, this was seen as an arts course. So it has got that spirit of poetry, imagination, doing things without being worried about, whether it's matching to the world.
True.
Right? Because mathematics is about what? In fact, in the whole Western tradition, mathematics is very closely related to theology.
Yeah, true.
And there is a very deep connection, even in Islamic thought, about mathematical.
And many Greek philosophers thought the truth is and God is in maybe found through the maths.
Yeah, absolutely. And that comes through right up till Newton and so on.
Yeah.
So it's a very well established tradition within that. So, that is a kind of a freedom and imagination, which writing about, in social science is a little more constrained. Philosophy is also a lot more constrained by the discourse itself.
Okay.
Although the language is English or whatever you want to write, Latin and with whatever thing, Sanskrit in certain classical traditions and so on. But you have had it in almost every language has produced its philosophy.
Okay.
And it is bound by the discipline of that language and the concepts you produce in that language.
True.
So I have always found science to be a very creative enterprise,
Talking about the constraints in social philosophy, currently we would maybe zoom out a little bit and talk more about the society and things when it comes to the sociology and social discourses. So I was wondering, maybe this is because the current scenario of contestation, in the sense everybody is competing against each other to have their own rights and shares. There is no space for maybe understanding each other, trying to understand the other and compromising and compassion. There is no language of compassion or compromise. So this could be one reason for the anything about the social, the discourse of social become very constrained, I feel.
Yeah, I mean we are in that kind of a situation, right? And part of the problem also has been about disciplines itself. Who are disciplines meant for? So let's say we have sociology and the different social sciences. It's a very small minority of a society which studies them.
Yes.
And if you look at higher levels of research, etc., then it's a much, much, much smaller minority which does that.
Yes.
Then the question, unlike the sciences, where you could have very specialized people working at high level research, and it's still meaningful because something of what they do is produced as products. Not all of them, but for a very large number of them. Especially in today's science, where most of it is driven by funding from various sources who have very clear end goals of a product of research. So at least there is something. Okay, I can be in a very abstract domain. Only 3 people, 4 people will know it's so super specialized, but I'm producing some new material or doing something else. Okay. In the social sciences, okay, we have all these scholars, we're all writing something and so on. That is not producible as a commodity for ordinary people to engage with.
Okay.
Right? So a smartphone, for example, everybody today in India uses, let's say, but none of them will have a clue about what the whole technology, the
working
science behind
the whole
it.
thing.
They can just see it as a thing, right? So there is some translation and transference of some kind of knowledge base of the sciences into these products.
Okay.
Now, in social sciences, that is the real challenge that we have.
Okay.
So we have people who have written about social theory, they have written about caste and religion, etc. Everything has been written about. But then we are talking about social strife between people, ordinary people.
Yes.
But what is being produced in understanding them is produced at a very higher esoteric level. The question is, how do all of that come down to the people?
Okay. The applicability, you mean?
Applicable or transferability, translatability, applicability, all those kinds of things. That is, in other words, if somebody has something very meaningful, they have understood something about society, how does it get part of our own understanding of ourselves?
Yes.
So that if suppose somebody says compassion is very important, or care, like you said, or non-violence or whatever, then how does it come down that all of us as ordinary people living in the society begin to understand that and say, oh yeah, you know what, that's what should influence the way I live.
Yes.
Has social science done that? I don't know. I mean, it's a more contentious thing, but I would say, yes, that kind of bringing those ideas down to the people who are not necessarily being trained or invested in learning those kind of vocabulary is very important. It's something which we talked about earlier about. So, and the kind of magazines you run, for example, for people to read and so on. So, and Kerala is particularly very good at it. I think they have a very wonderful public discourse just being produced, because the kind of stuff in Malayalam that they produce for our, general readership is quite astounding compared to any of the other states I've seen, maybe Bengal a bit. But so what I'm saying is, maybe that is the challenge of the larger things. How do we bring these ideas? And, I think every social science discipline has produced very important insights into so many things.
Yes, the anthropology, the sociology, they invest a lot of time and effort in understanding the other or different communities, how their ethics work, how their internal rationality work and everything. And they produce a lot of literature. But you feel there is a lack of communicating this to the masses which would finally help them to understand more about the other, in the sense one community could understand more about the other, which would lead to more understanding and more communication, more compassion. But that part is lacking. That's what you're saying.
I think so. I think a lot of these academic books don't reach to the people.
Yes, that's true.
Really, very few people read them. I don't think too many academic people themselves read these books, unless when it comes unless there's a particular citation or referencing, they might look at it. So there's a lot of very good work which has been written. So many wonderful, deeply insightful work from history, anthropology, sociology. We have to figure out how best to engage with it. How do you bring it? I mean, for example, I'm here, as you know, for the book discussion of Said Alvi's book, right, on barbers, caste in Islam. And there is so much, it's a very well written book. And when I was reading it, there are so many new thoughts and ideas which comes, and a lot of things you can actually understand about communities, right? Now, you need many such books like that. So if that is, in that sense, that is readable, but because it's been published by an academic publisher, so most people can't access it.
Yeah, true.
So these are all these questions. So now, stories like this, if they percolate, will we begin to get more? It's not to help us make decision. We are judgment should be our last thing. First is to understand so many other ideas coming in, right? So can these academic books reach people, or those ideas from them?
True.
I would think that so many of these books, they should just write a simple common essay from many of these books for ordinary readership. Say this is what the book, or just summaries and say this is what they are talking about. These are the things we can learn from it.
More like from academics to the activism. But I would say a successful academic translating to activism would be like more Dalit studies, gender studies. And these studies actually translates to the activism and changes on the ground.
True, and also that's because many of the academics are themselves activists.
Yes.
Not necessarily the case in the other disciplines. So you could have sociologists and anthropologists who are not themselves activists. Not necessarily, there are many. But in general, I'm saying, their domain is the academic institute, universities and so on, and they teach and do something. But whereas gender studies has always been had, and the Dalit studies, I've had, academics who have also been activists, who have taken positions, who have fought for it and so on. So that is part of the nature of these disciplines, right? But there is, as I said, how in understanding other communities and societies, what are the different stories that we have? What are the different representations? How do we make sense of it?
Exactly.
Because a lot of the things which you talked about, the lack of care and compassion comes a lot from ignorance.
Exactly.
One can be deliberately provoking hatred and stuff, but there's a lot of it comes from ignorance. Like I was just telling you, right? I mean, there are people in Bangalore who have all these stereotypes, and now about Muslim stereotyping has become a big thing, right? Okay, so every time when they say this, then I ask them, have you ever met a Muslim in your life? Have you gone to one of their houses? Have you talked to them? Do you even know what you're talking about? And you'll find that they don't know anybody. They haven't talked, they haven't engaged with them as people.
Yes.
So I'm saying at that level, you know, their views are coming from pure ignorance.
Yes.
So that's why this question of conversation, question of opening up these very different stories of all kinds.
Yes.
So much of these, even if these are Hindu communities, let's say in Bangalore, it is also true with caste for them.
Yes.
They will say something, oh, these Dalits are like this and this, but they have no idea. They've never even met somebody. They've never seen what kind of life they have to live.
Yes.
So I'm saying at one level, the hope is that if they know, if they are open enough to listen to all of it, maybe the beginnings of conversation are possible.
Yeah. So basically, like how communities act and fashion themselves, like on what basis, in this sense, the underlying ethics behind their actions and things are unknown to other communities. So they are not able to understand how the other communities work. And this is across the communities, I guess.
Across.
Like there is a very lack of engagement and communication.
Yeah.
So which would have resulted in more compassion, as we said.
Yeah.
That's very pressing in the sense in the current scenario.
Yeah.
So that I feel that would be the reason you again move towards the world of fictions. You started writing fiction, which is still includes a lot of philosophical questions, but it's more approachable, more to the mass audience, so that they would also be privy to the discourses and things. And this shift towards the fiction writing has been influenced by your concerns about this ignorance, I guess.
I definitely, because actually what happened around 2018, I've been in different institutions. I was at NIAS, then went to Manipal, set up something, then came back. But by then I was beginning to find it very difficult to make sense of the politics of the country. Especially a lot of this social media, which provokes people into thinking they know and making all these very, very hateful comments. And it had become part of everyday life. It is not that there are some people doing it, and it become part of, casual talk. That you could actually say something really, very insulting and all that. And it's taken as part of their way one talks. So I decided to, that time, to really focus my attention to children.
Okay.
So it was about 2018. I thought of this thing of starting something informally called Barefoot Philosophers. And since I still had students at that time and I was in NIAS, I said, maybe we should focus our attention at a much younger age. Because I was seeing already that how much impact children are already having with stereotyping and believing in certain kinds of things. And as we were talking about, competitive nature had become so ingrained in our school systems and so on. So I thought maybe it may be useful to work with children first. And so I started this initiative called Philosophy for Children. And that was really wonderful for me, is to really learn about, and it's not about applying philosophy, but it's about provoking them to think about the world in a particular manner.
Yes.
And we did a lot of them. It was really wonderful experience in different languages. And then I wrote a book called Philosophy for Children, which is now in many different languages. But through that, we were able to reach people whom I would never have been able to reach philosophy or even academic world to them.
Yes.
Right? So there's a school in near Salem called 𝐑𝐢𝐬𝐚 school in Konganapuram, in a village in Konganapuram, where the chairman of that school was very interested in a kind of ethical teaching to children. And he had designed a whole school teaching methods based on Tirukkural.
Yes.
Okay, which for them, in Tamil Nadu was very important, ethical text. So, but then because of that, he was trying to understand what does it mean to teach the ideas of truth and ethics to children. And then he came across this Philosophy for Children. Then I've been engaging with them for the last many years. Now we have introduced, in a 9th standard, 1 hour every week as a philosophy regular class, not as extracurricular, regular class which everybody does, where we are really talking about cultivating the senses. So philosophy not as knowledge domain, but philosophy as cultivating certain attitudes, cultivating, for example, thinking, questioning, asking them about how do we make sense, why do we accept something, and also to make them understand their own subjects better, whether they were doing science or not. And for me, mainly it was to give them the confidence of these children to be independent of schools and teachers at one level. That if you have bad teachers or bad schools, that cannot destroy you in your life. So how do, especially these people who have been marginalized and not been in the mainstream system, which is with social capital, so how do you liberate them from that? And that has been, for me, that was a very important thing of bringing it down to the larger public. So the children thing is what then provoked me to doing the other book I did, Social Life of Democracy. And that I was very struck by, Ambedkar's idea of social democracy. And I'd been struggling with this question. We've been talking about democracy and so on. Electoral democracy seems to be a lot of problems with it, at some level. There are some very important elements to it, in a sense, in the Indian context. But I wanted to find a text which will speak to people, not to other academics or, whatever stuff. So I wrote this book for Siegel called The Social Life of Democracy. And that was also, I think it was, it's really one of my more important texts in the sense, but it's very readable and people can actually read, disagree, communicate, whatever it is in that sense. But so that was the point about bringing it down, in a sense, to set up a conversation with people and see how do you engage with society in a larger sense with these ideas. The fiction, I did not begin to write following a prayer for communicating a philosophical question, actually. But what you say is true. That is the end product. I wrote it because I was puzzled by a particular question, which I could have done as an academic work, like what is the meaning of prayers and why do people pray? So when I pray, I'm saying some words. What happens to it, etc. So that has been in my buzzing my mind for a long time as a philosophical, as a thing on language and so on. But there was no way, I didn't have the capacity to write it as a book in philosophy or whatever, and I was not really interested in that because after working with these children and so on, when I wrote the novel Following a Prayer, it is really about this question from a child's point of view, not from an adult's point of view.
But very magical realism going on, I guess, like they are running behind the words and they're plucking the words from the trees. So that layer is also going on in the...
I think that is what triggered that book, because I said, okay, how will I intellectually in an abstract manner answer the question? This is a question the child poses to a grandmother who's always murmuring prayers. She says, who is listening to you? Why do you keep saying prayers the whole day? Where is it going? And so the grandmothers are irritated, just as a joke says, go run behind it and see, you'll know where it goes.
True.
And that becomes this magical realism or whatever, in the sense that for me, it's more than magical realism, because for me, words have power.
Real existence.
There is real existence, there's power, there's causal capacity of words. And that is really what I was exploring in that novel, that how words produce this in us. And so when she playfully goes off, and then the consequences of following those words. That's very metaphorical. She gets lost in the forest, comes back and doesn't speak, and so on, right? So, yeah, there is, for me there, the question was not about transmitting philosophical ideas, but although as the story progressed, some of the questions of what is language, what is meaning, but all of them are filtered through the level of those girls, 10 and 12-year-old girls. That is all that, I'm not writing as a philosopher in that. I'm not writing about my knowledge of what I know about language. I'm writing about what is it to think about it by these children at that particular context. Right? And I think it's also different from a philosophy text in that it can make you very emotional. I mean, it can provoke your emotions. You can be happy, angry, you can laugh, you can cry, you can get angry,
And I personally, I was very sad, to be honest.
That's at the end. But not till there, I hope,
But I was very invested in where you're taking us, and at the end, I was very sad.